In its 2025 public report, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service officially reclassified Canada-based Khalistani extremists as a critical national security threat. This reverses decades of official policy. For years, the previous administration protected these separatist networks, treating their organizing and rhetoric as a matter of freedom of expression. This leniency persisted despite a deep historical scar. In 1985, Canada-based Babur Khalsa extremists orchestrated the bombing of Air India Flight 182. The bombing killed 329 people. 40 years later, it remains the deadliest terrorist attack in Canadian history. A vast majority of the victims were Canadian citizens. Yet, for decades, the government treated this extremism as an Indian geopolitical problem, keeping it categorized as a foreign issue rather than a domestic concern. Today, Ottawa is abandoning that historical blind spot. The state is caught in a squeeze, an erosion of domestic safety on one side and the hardening reality of trade vulnerability on the other. Ignoring a terrorist network because its primary target is overseas guarantees that you will eventually go blind to the threat that same network poses to your own citizens at home. Today, these networks operate as a permanent fixture of Canadian suburban society. A Ministry of Finance report confirms that politically motivated violent extremism receives direct financial and logistical backing from networks based right inside Canada. These groups exploit local institutions. By infiltrating neighborhood organizations and Gurudwara committees, they normalize their agenda and actively manipulate local public opinion. They use established community pillars to quietly collect funds from unsuspecting residents, masking the collections as legitimate donations. Those funds are then covertly diverted. The money is funneled away from local programs and channeled directly into violent extremist activities. These are sophisticated financial syndicates. By draining local resources to subsidize violence, they are creating a self-sustaining ecosystem of extremism within the country's borders. This institutional capture has spilled out of the financial ledgers and onto the streets. The extremist ideology has merged with local organized crime. Provinces like British Columbia and Ontario have seen a sharp surge in violence, driven by extortion rings, drug syndicates, and public daytime shootings. This is the reality of parallel governance. Empowered gangs are operating localized systems of control that openly defy and overpower Canadian law enforcement. In Indian mythology, the Bhasmasura effect describes a demon granted the power to destroy others, who ultimately turns on his own creator. Nurturing a destructive force in your own backyard guarantees it will eventually turn against you. Decades of tolerance for foreign-targeted extremism have undermined the domestic rule of law. The result is a level of civil unrest that the state is struggling to manage. At the exact same time, Ottawa is fighting a second front. The country is suffering from a severe domestic cost of living crisis and the looming threat of international trade isolation. Contrast this vulnerable economic position with India, which currently stands as the fifth largest and one of fastest-growing major economies in the world. The trade dynamic is asymmetrical. Canada holds vast natural resources, but it requires access to India's massive consumer market to stabilize its own economy. Ottawa cannot afford to alienate a critical global superpower to protect a fractured domestic extremist network. Cold, hard economic survival, rather than a sudden realization of moral clarity, is the primary catalyst forcing the Canadian government to rewrite its national security policy. Under Prime Minister Mark Carney, an immediate diplomatic reset is underway. The two countries have agreed to appoint mutual security liaison officers to directly share intelligence. Security cooperation is moving alongside an economic olive branch. India is dispatching its largest ever business delegation to Canada to resume talks on a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. This bilateral move signals a clear recalculation. Canada is now treating its relationship with India as an absolute economic necessity, stripping away the political liabilities of the past. A country cannot project strength or uphold its values abroad if it has surrendered its local institutions and economic leverage at home. In the end, a nation's foreign policy is dictated